All right, folks, huge story out of Texas where federal judges have said that Texas cannot use maps that were passed by the legislature. Remember, that map, that set off an entire battle all across the country when it came to the issue of gerrymandering. Donald Trump called Texas Governor Greg Abbott and said, "Get me 5 seats." Abbott said, "Sure, I'll do that." As a result, you had this huge battle to actually pass these particular maps. Well, of course, you remember Democrats walked out and they said, hey, we can't stick around for this. Well, the federal judges have now ruled that, guess what, can't use the maps. And here's the deal. You got Attorney General Ken Paxton saying these far-left judges. Well, the judge who wrote the opinion was a Trump appointee. This is what U.S. Judge Jeffrey Brown said. Again, appointed by Donald Trump. He said the public perception of this case is that it's about politics. To be sure, politics played a role in the drawing, the 2025 map. But it was much more than just politics. Substantial evidence shows that Texas racially gerrymandered the 2025 map. Brown ordered at the 2026 congressional election, quote, shall proceed under the map that the Texas legislature enacted in 2021. Now, of course, Ken Paxton said they're going to appeal this case to the Supreme Court. So here's the deal, all right? This right here, okay, proposed. This is current. So these maps right here, this is exactly right now how everything is constituted. And so what did you have? You had Mark Vesey's seat in Dallas. You had Jasmine Crockett's seat in Dallas. When you go down to Houston, you had, of course, Al Green's seat, the 9th Congressional District. Then you have the 18th Congressional District. That seat has yet to be filled because Abbott has been screwing around. He's even called that special election between Christian Menifee as well as Amanda Edwards to take place January 31st. So those folks would have gone more than 11 months without a member of Congress. This here was the map that Texas actually passed that eliminated Crockett's district, eliminated Green's district. They moved Green into the 9th district, moved Green from the 9th to the 18th. And so what that would do, that would eliminate 5 Democrats. 2 of those would be African-American. Joining us right now, Texas State Representative Yolanda Jones. Of course, she was on the committee, this so-called bipartisan redistricting committee. And here's the deal. They kept saying over and over, Yolanda, they kept trying to tell Democrats, do not talk about fair maps. Do not talk about, in terms of, what's fair and also gerrymandering. They said, no, you have to call it racist gerrymandering. And so here you have this Trump-appointed federal judge saying, indeed, race was at the heart of the changing of these maps.
For sure. And you remember, Roland, every time you saw me during the quorum break, I kept saying, call it what it is, racist, racist, and it's racist some more. Because our talking points were, it's political, Trump wants 5 Republican seats, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, that's not illegal. So I'm thankful that our fleeing from the FBI and injustice was worth it. But I'm going to hold my fingers, Roland, about the Supreme Court in the Louisiana versus Calais case. Because all these Voting Rights Act cases are going to hinge on what the Supremes do in that case. I'm almost certain you're familiar with that. If you're not, I'm happy to explain.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, because of how the rules are, the only place they can appeal this decision is the United States Supreme Court. Now, people have to understand something, that this decision was a 3-judge panel. Again, Brown, Trump appointee, who also clerked for Greg Abbott. Okay. Then you have, and this same person was a former Texas Supreme Court justice. You have another federal judge appointed by President Barack Obama. And then you had another judge, Dear Smith, appointed by Reagan, cast a dissenting vote. He's going to release his own opinion. And so, yeah, it's now here's the issue. Timing now dictates this. Because the deadline to file for next year is December 8th.
December 8th. December 8th.
So the problem is we're like 3 weeks away. So here's the issue. They can appeal, but if the Supreme Court doesn't take it up or issues, and again, the Supreme Court does have a precedent and they've done this before. They did it in Louisiana and in Georgia, where they said, hey, even though a lower court ruled this, we're going to freeze everything in place. So they could freeze, not the current map. They could freeze this proposed map by saying, well, we know what they said, but it's too late for making any changes, so we're going to freeze this in place. But they could also say, we're going to go to the lower court and freeze it in place and still hear the arguments later. So you don't know, but the bottom line is Republicans, they are banking on this right-wing court siding with them.
I agree with that, Roland. And here's the deal. If the Calais case out of Louisiana, if the Supremes keep the Voting Rights Act, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, then I think that the Supremes are going to affirm what this 3-judge panel did. But if they eviscerate the Voting Rights Act, where they're saying to comply with the Voting Rights Act, where you create a district based on race, like they did in Louisiana, because they cut a black district out, and in order to remedy them cutting out a black district, then Louisiana created a second black district. Then the non-black folks sued on that 2024 map, and that's where we are. What's really interesting about the case out of Louisiana is that the Supreme Court had them argue that case in March of this year, and then had them come back on October 15th to re-argue, which is incredibly rare. And the issue is the Voting Rights Act constitutional? Does the Voting Rights Act violate the 14th and 15th Amendment? So I don't know where they're going to land. Stare decisis has always said, since we got the Civil Rights Act, that the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, and the 14th and 15th Amendment Equal Protection Clause work together. So this is the first time we've had a Supreme Court saying, does the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, violate the 14th and 15th Amendment? In other words, is the Voting Rights Act constitutional? That scares the shit out of me.
Well,
true story.
Well, here's the other thing here, okay? So the Supreme Court previously ruled that if it's a partisan gerrymandering, they serve no role, no purpose. It's left up to the states. But the Supreme Court, depending upon this Louisiana case, the Supreme Court can still rule on racial gerrymandering. Here's the problem for Texas. Texas decided to argue before the courts, oh no, this was a partisan gerrymander. Here's the problem. Trump was so stupid, thankfully, that his own Department of Justice sent a letter to Texas saying, this map, they said this map was racially done. Texas was in court arguing that this map had no racial intent in it. So they were supporting that. So then all of a sudden the letter comes. What then happens? Abbott, in his proclamation calling for a special session, says we have to do this in response to the Department of Justice letter. So this is what Judge Brown said, which is hilarious. Judge Brown literally writes, the governor explicitly, first of all, Brown said, and I'll read the Texas Tribune story. Brown said it was difficult to analyze the DOJ letter because it contained, quote, so many factual, legal, and typographical errors. But the fact that the state leaders had pointed to the letter repeatedly as the impetus for redistricting was enough. Quote, the governor explicitly directed the legislature to draw a new U.S. House map to resolve DOJ's concerns. In other words, the governor explicitly directed the legislature to redistrict based on race. In press appearances, the governor plainly and expressly disavowed any partisan objective and instead repeatedly stated that his goal was to eliminate coalition districts and create new majority Hispanic districts.
But Roland, I was there, right? And during the redistricting hearings, I literally said that DOJ letter is wrong on the law. And if you will recall, Roland, at the first redistricting sham meetings, my colleagues were saying that it's based on the DOJ letter, it's based on the DOJ letter, it's based on the DOJ letter. By the time they got to the actual hearing at the Capitol, somebody told them, hey, man, this is actually racist. Y'all now have to say it's partisan. So my colleagues, the Republican ones, at one stage of the game were saying we're relying on the DOJ letter.
Right.
And then right after that, after somebody said y'all dumb, y'all stupid, y'all racist, then they flipped the script, which all that testimony came out in the hearing. And I kept saying to my Democratic colleagues who did not want to call racism,
right,
you got to call it racism. You heard me, Roland, say,
listen,
you got to call it racism. You and I were on the same page.
Listen, I talked to Tarrant County Commissioner Lisa Simmons. She said to me that they were at a rally in Tarrant County and they were handed the language to say, and all these Democrats kept getting up there, kept saying, fair maps, fair map. And she was like, what the hell are y'all doing? So when she went up, she says, no, these are racist, gerrymandered maps. And you kept saying, hey, dumbasses, if you don't say racist maps,
we're going to lose.
When we go to court, they're going to use your own words against you. So here's the deal. So Abbott's problem is they use their own words. In fact, this is so hilarious. Abbott released a statement. He said that it was absurd to say the maps were drawn with discriminatory intent. He said the legislature redrew our congressional maps to better reflect Texans' conservative voting preferences, and for no other reason. This ruling is clearly erroneous and undermines the authority of the U.S. Constitution assigned to the Texas legislature by imposing a different map by judicial edict. Dude, you literally put the DOJ letter in your proclamation.
He did. But Roland, here's the shit show that is now going on right now. Currently, Congressman Green filed for Texas 18, right? Because in the new maps, 65% of the new Texas 18 came from Texas 9. It had only stayed 25% intact. You cannot file for two separate seats.
Right.
You can't be on the ballot. So Congressman Green has got to decide, do I come back out of Texas 18, right, and file for Texas 9? Because right now, his Texas 9 is what it is currently. Because if the Supremes come back after it and they say, no, we've changed the Voting Rights Act, it violates the 14th and 15th Amendments of the equal protection of the Constitution, then he's shit out of luck and he's out. He's the person with the hardest decision to make.
Well, first of all, let's be real clear. He is a hard decision. Again, everybody watch it. This is the current map. This is the current map right here. Okay? This is the current map. All right? So now so what she's talking about is how things are right now in terms of 5 districts, Democrat, talking about where Green is in the 9th, the 18th, and then, of course, you have the 30th with Jasmine Crockett. Then you got Mark Vesey. You got Sylvia.
33rd.
Okay, 33rd. Here's the other problem, y'all. This is the proposed map. So here's the issue. This is the problem. Okay, the deadline is December 8th. So here's a conundrum for Green, but also Crockett. Because Crockett has to decide, well, do I file to run in the new district, which is where Vesey is? Vesey is talking about possibly running for Tarrant County judge. Crockett may run for the United States Senate. And so here's the it's all this stuff going on. So to your point, because you don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do, the limbo is very simple. Will the Supreme Court freeze in place the new Republican map, or will they say, let's freeze in place the old map? That's literally where we are.
So Congressman Green, as I said before, he's going to get reelected in the current Texas 9. Under the new Texas...
I'm sorry, when you say the current Texas 9, mean...
Like what it is now.
Right. What it is now, meaning
He's won. He's been there 20 years.
There you go. His original 9th congressional district. Got it.
Right. But the new 9th literally has been created for a Republican. So, and they took 65% of his current Texas 9 and moved it into 18. And moved it into 18.
So he has to decide, do I file?
He's already filed for 18.
Right.
Which was $3,200.
So he has to, by the deadline, does he withdraw that and file for the 9th, hoping the Supreme Court freezes in place
what's now,
or risk the Supreme
being in a Republican district that he represents that number.
Right.
So the person that's getting the royal screwing is Congressman Al Green. And let me be clear. In this lawsuit, you will see plaintiffs and plaintiff intervener Alexander Green. So he literally is fighting. He is fighting to keep, you see his name? And he's the person who stands to lose the most.
Well, the problem now is the appeal goes to the Supreme Court. And will the Supreme Court freeze in place the current map or the new map?
But the Calais case at Louisiana, Roland, which they've been considering since at least October 15th or before that, but the latest oral arguments, they've had that long enough to make a damn ruling before December 8th. So if they don't make it, shame on them.
Well, we have seen how they can move fast when they want to.
Or slow.
Or move slow when they want to. They Representative Gerrymander Jones. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me, Roland.
All right, thanks a bunch. Joe, I'll start with you. This is a legal conundrum. We're in this very weird space here because we can sort of guess the Supreme Court may side with Republicans. The problem is this is the same Supreme Court that ruled that the Opportunity District in Alabama should be created because it was a violation of the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Section 2. They allowed the Louisiana seat to go forward as well. So the problem is we don't know where in the hell this court is.
Yeah, we don't know where they are, and we don't know whether or not they would look to preserve the status quo. Often, when there is an early thing like a TRO, basically is what you're asking for. When you say that it looks like I'm going to win, so therefore this ought to be held in place or this ought to be stopped. That's basically what this three-judge panel is saying. Interestingly, the Republicans are majoring in the art of deflection here. While they claim that we're being racial, the fact of the matter is they got pointed out for being racial themselves. And the judge, who was a Trump judge, great minds think alike, I made out to read the same first paragraph that you read at the top of the show. The idea that this is a racist gerrymander. And as of now, you cannot racially gerrymander. You can politically gerrymander, but which is the short of it. You know, there's a racist gerrymander, and what they've said is that because it's a coalition district, any district that's a coalition district where two or more minority groups form the majority, they come together to form the majority, that therefore you skip, and it's unconstitutional, and therefore you have to undo it. And that's patently wrong, and that's what this decision said. But the question becomes, to your point, what this Supreme Court is going to do on this Louisiana case. Because if they decide that a racist gerrymander, a race-based gerrymander is okay, and not just if there's some incidental effect, then theoretically we would be out of luck. But the worst part about it all, to the point that you're making, is that this Supreme Court has been so inconsistent and so fill in the blank that you don't even know whether they will approach this with the proper amount of measure, right? So that's as important and as dangerous as anything. The idea that they jump to a conclusion or they jump and ignore so much precedent related to the Voting Rights Act, et cetera. Even if they do that slowly, it's not good news, right? But in any event, the Republicans know that the decision that happened today is bad news. And this reminds you, Donald Trump will never fail. He talks before he thinks, and he says things, and he has people in the Justice Department write things and misspell them and not do it the right way, even where they're incomplete sentences. They have them say things where now the judge has used their very words against them. This is what happens when you speak before you think, when you're not strategic. It's not, oh, let's just hammer it. Let's just do what we want to do. We'll worry about the rules later. There are some judges, including, as it turns out, some Trump judges that are worried about the rules and that are concerned about the rules. And so this is a sound decision. We just have to see how long it lasts.
You know, Mustafa, again, this is a whole lot that's going on here. And what's hanging in the balance really is these 5 seats going to be critical. And also, if I'm correct, and I got to pull it up, I think California, their measure also was contingent that if Texas seats got reversed, then their thing doesn't take effect. So there's like a whole domino effect here.
Yeah, there definitely is. I think the question will also be, there are a couple of others who have already done some gerrymandering, also Missouri and I believe it was North Carolina as well. You know, as you said, it's the dominoes continue to fall, but maybe the dominoes need to fall because we shouldn't have gerrymandering. We should make sure that we have fair maps. You know, it's interesting. You know, we come on the show and we continue to raise that these people are not ready for prime time. You can tell it by, you know, the documents that they put forward that are not prepared, you know, properly, which blows my mind. I remember going through review after review after review of documents whenever we were, you know, submitting different types of things. And then for them to actually get their hand caught in the cookie jar, you know, that July 7th letter from the Civil Rights Division. So, you know, that they continue to make mistakes, but we also understand that there are courts that often will, you know, support them, even though they're not bringing forward everything that would normally be necessary. The other thing that I want to say real quickly, Roland, is that, you know, I appreciate not only this show and the Congresswoman who was on and others who continue to make sure that we don't sugarcoat stuff, because when we sugarcoat stuff and we don't call it what it is, Joe just said it, you know, racial gerrymandering is illegal. We got to continue to make sure that we're doing that. And then the last thing is, of course, you know, you had mentioned about the Supreme Court and how quickly they might move. We remember in 2021 that heartbeat law there in Texas, I think it was U.S. versus Texas, was one of those cases that moved rather quickly. I believe it was around 39 days. So folks should still continue to you know, stay focused, continue to push, continue to highlight these injustices that are going on, because nothing is settled until it's settled.
You know, the thing that we have to understand here, Randy, is that these are monumental decisions. This is not just about, okay, 5 members of Congress. It's who people are going to be represented by. And we can't overlook that. And when we talk about who they're represented by, that also then impacts millions and billions of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to affect, you know, every decision, every household, how people live, the rights that they have. I mean, it's going to have major impact. And if we're really honest, we're really trying to see if these judges are going to show do their jobs and uphold the law, or are they going to uphold their allegiance to Trump? I think that's what we have seen a lot in the past. But now Trump is even shaking judges whom he appointed. And I think that he's pushed them too far where they're saying, wait a minute, I do have to uphold the law, and I can't go forward with holding up, you know, what you're asking me to do. And that is making me somewhat happy. But I think it's what's making us also nervous, because are they going to continue in the way that it seems that if we look at the cases the last few weeks, that judges, even judges that he appointed, our past Republican presidents have appointed, are saying this is enough. Let me stand by and uphold the law. Or are we going to show an allegiance to the party? And I think that is what is making our stomachs in knots.
And, you know, what you've seen this schizophrenic court with their rulings. And so we don't know, but we're certainly going to stay on top of this, because this has huge implications.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase, and I'm here with a very important message. We are at a turning point in the Black community where we must have equity in the apps we use that scale to billions of dollars. But this time, we own the infrastructure, we own the culture, and we shape the future. And Fanbase is the future. Fanbase combines the free functionality of Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube into an all-in-one platform built for the evolution of social media and monetization. With over 1.4 million users, that's real proof that we are shifting the conversation of tech ownership and equity for creators. So right now, I want you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase at $665 a share. This marks a turning point in Black ownership of social media. If we don't take this opportunity to own social media right now, we will always be customers to our own creations. And that can't go on. So once again, go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest today. We must own the platforms where our voices live, our stories matter, and where our culture drives the world. Thank you.